Hey there YouTube fam, welcome back to our channel. Today we've got an exciting topic that's been on our minds lately. Why is Africa often referred to as the third world, despite being rich in resources and history? Stick around because we've got some enlightening insights and reactions lined up just for you. Before we dive in, let's appreciate the beauty and diversity of our great continent. Africa, with its vast landscapes, rich cultural heritage and vibrant communities, is a continent that has shaped the world in countless ways. But here's the paradox. Despite being the cradle of humanity and the source of immense natural wealth, Africa is often labeled as third world. Today we're not just exploring why this term is used, but we're also delving into the complex factors that contribute to Africa's economic challenges. To understand Africa's present, we must look back at its past. Colonization has left a lasting impact on the continent, shaping its social, economic structure and political landscape. Now let's take a moment to watch some reactions from people across the globe as they discover the historical roots of Africa's challenges. But first, let us watch the video that has sparked this conversation. Stick around and I'll be right back.
Africa is third world. Africa is third world. Yet our wealth built you. Our resources practically made you rich. You won't even leave us alone. You won't leave Congo alone. And yet Africa is third world. Yeah.
Before we dive into the reactions, I want to give a shout out to our amazing sister who sparked this insightful journey into the heart of the great motherland. Now let's see how people from around the world react to the questions she posed. Stick around for the breakdown after the reactions. You won't want to miss it.
Do you guys know that 14 African countries still pay a colonial tax to France? 14 African countries still pay a tax for being colonized by the French. And you know how much that tax is? $500 billion a year taken from 14 African countries. And the reason that they take this money is because they built infrastructure and buildings and the resources that they brought to Africa. It's payback for the colonization that they did. We brought resources to you, we brought infrastructure to you, we brought civilization to you, so now you have to pay us back for it. If any of these African nations refuse to do it, they mysteriously get a their government and militant groups pop up everywhere. They had to sign a pact for this. And do you want to know what's included in that pact? Number one, the reason that the pact exists is to impose the colonial tax so that the African countries can pay back for the infrastructure that was brought to them from the French colonization. The reason that they get that $500 billion a year from these African countries is because they force these African countries to deposit their bank reserves into the French ministry, and the French government invests those funds into the French market, and only they know the return of whatever amount comes back as returns. And it's estimated that it's a $500 billion, and they don't give any of that money back to these African countries. And because the money is in banks that are controlled by the French, these African countries that deposited their monies into these French banks have to ask the French government for permission to take their money out. And once they take their money out, it is considered a loan that they have to pay interest on. And on top of that, they can only buy their military equipment from France. They have to allow French presence in their country, and the French military can invade these countries at any point if they feel that the French interest in these countries is threatened at all. And this part, all minerals available and yet to be discovered, France has the first right of refusal in these 14 countries. And all contracts, public or private, French companies have the first right of refusal. The French government is considered one of the wealthiest in the world because they built their wealth on the backs of African countries and forced this colonial tax where they're getting $500 billion a year for nothing other than colonizing these countries.
So most of the greatest economies in the world would not exist without Africa. And I'm not talking about the contributions of the African slaves or the resources that were stolen. I mean, if Africans left all of Europe and left every American country where they currently are living, working, actively contributing to the economy, to the life and well-being of these people, I tell you, a lot of countries will fall apart. The UK will fall apart like this if all Africans left. What would be left of your health care? What would be, like, literally, Africa is currently saving the world again and again and again. It's happening right now. So how are we able to save your economy, give you resources for literally everything and still be told.
The amount of trash spoken about Africa actually bothers me, because it's like, in order for Western civilizations to even be remotely successful, they had to steal the people from Africa and steal the resources. And they still steal the resources till this day. And we're not even going to talk about the people who think that all of Africa is like huts. And we're not even going to talk about that. But it's like, bro, educate yourself. It's like, disappointed but not surprised. We live amongst...
Go back and watch the whole video. Do y'all think we jokingly and, play around, we make a whole map of Africa and every country is the resource that the rich is in? We're not playing around. Like, literally, I've made so many videos talking about how DRC has majority of the world's cobalt and coltan. We're dubbed one of the most poorest countries in the world, but yet we are home to over 80% of cobalt and coltan. We could be the richest country in the world, but you know why we aren't? Colonization, imperialism. The day we finally get a leader that is like the West, we gonna keep our resources, we're gonna have some actual trade regulations. Oh, that's when America and the rest of the world will crumble.
Undoubtedly, sis. Undoubtedly. I want people to read this book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. It's a great book.
Alright folks, we've covered a lot, and now it's time for the breakdown. Let's analyze the key factors contributing to Africa's economic challenges and explore ways we can collectively work towards a more equitable future. Africa is not just the cradle of civilization, it's also a treasure trove of natural resources. From minerals to agricultural land, Africa contributes significantly to the global economy. However, the exploitation of these resources has often been marked by unequal trade practices and a lack of value addition within the continent. It is crucial to highlight the resilience and ingenuity of the African people. Despite challenges, there are countless stories of innovation, entrepreneurship, and success emerging from our continent. Let's see how our viewers react to these aspects. Alright folks, now those were some eye-opening videos from passionate individuals shedding light on a harsh reality. Now let's break down some key points about the impact of the colonial tax and its staggering financial implications for 14 African countries. First off, did you know that these 14 African countries collectively pay a mind-boggling $500 billion a year as part of the colonial tax to the French? That's a staggering amount. It raises important questions about the dynamics of this financial arrangement. Now, the concept behind this tax is rooted in the idea of repayment for infrastructure built during the colonial era. It's a complex situation. The French argue that they brought resources and civilization to these nations, and now they expect compensation. But here is the kicker. This money isn't going back to the African countries as one might expect. The French government mandates that these African nations deposit their bank reserves into the French ministry, which then invests those funds into the French market. The returns on these investments are estimated to be a staggering $500 billion annually. But here's the twist. None of this money goes back to the African nations. It's one-way flow of wealth. The consequences of this financial relationship are profound. African countries are bound by stringent conditions. They must get French approval to access their own deposited funds, and any withdrawal is considered a loan, incurring interest. Additionally, they are obligated to purchase military equipment exclusively from France, allowing French military presence in their nations. But it doesn't stop there. France secures the first right of reversal for all minerals, public or private. The French government and companies have the upper hand in mining contracts, creating a staggering level of economic control. This history is not just about wealth, it's about the enduring consequences of centuries of colonization. It's about the exploitation of African nations, the systemic oppression that persists even up to now. As we reflect on these harsh realities, it is crucial to keep the conversation alive. Understanding the past helps us navigate the complexities of the present. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's work towards a world that acknowledges and rectifies the injustices of the past. Now, let's dive into the fascinating journey of redefining Africa's narrative and breaking free from the outdated term Third World. Did you know that this term originated during the Cold War as a way to categorize nations based on their political alignment? Back then, the Third World label encompassed the majority of Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, and Asia. It was essentially a geopolitical tag highlighting highlighting a nation's political ideology during a time of intense global unrest. Fast forward to today, and the term third world is considered archaic by many modern academics. The language has evolved, and now we often use terms like developing countries or low and lower middle income countries to describe nations in various stages of economic development. Here's the thing, while the term third world might have served a purpose during the Cold War, it's now seen as an overly simplistic and even misleading term. It's essential to recognize that this label is a political classification and doesn't necessarily capture the intricate economic and social nuances of a country. Critics, however, argue that reducing diverse nations to a single category ignores their unique challenges, achievements, and potential for growth. Now, let's ponder a thought. If terms like third world are outdated and potentially limiting, how can Africa break free from this label? Here is a remarkable example. China. Just like many African nations were once labeled third world, China faced similar categorization during the Cold War. But look at China now, a global economic powerhouse, challenging perceptions and defying expectations. China's transformation from a third world country to an economic giant showcases the potential for change. Africa, with its rich resources, diverse cultures, and resilient people, is poised for a similar transformation. The key lies in recognizing and harnessing Africa's potential. By embracing innovative solutions, fostering sustainable development, and challenging outdated narratives, African nations can redefine their path, just like China did. Let's delve into the critical issue that demands our attention: systemic racism affecting young Africans and people of African descent. A recent report by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights reveals distressing violations of international human rights law, creating a call to action for transformative change towards racial justice and equality. The report emphasizes the stark reality: despite progress, people of African descent face systemic challenges across the globe, from unequal access to health and education to disparities in social protection and justice. The systemic barriers are demoralizing, especially for the youth striving to outshine against all odds. Think about it. While young Africans aspire to break barriers and make a mark, they often encounter hurdles rooted in discriminatory practices. The report points out alarming issues such as poverty, enforced disappearance, and violations that persist, casting a shadow over their dreams. Furthermore, the report sheds light on troubling incidents, allegations of discriminatory treatment, unlawful deportations, and excessive use of force against African migrants. It's disheartening to witness young Africans facing such adversities as they navigate their journeys. But here is the turning point. The report doesn't just highlight problems, it advocates for transformative change. It calls for dismantling deep-rooted systems, paving the way for a more just and equitable future for young Africans. This is a call for solidarity, a reminder that the fight against systemic racism is a shared responsibility. By understanding the challenges faced by young Africans, we can collectively contribute to breaking down these barriers and fostering a world where everyone has an equal chance to shine. As we reflect on these systemic challenges, let's channel our energy into creating a world where young Africans and people of African descent can thrive. Share your thoughts on the pressing issue in the comments below. Until next time, signing off.